Hi, my name is Sheila Sheedy, and I'm here today with these four lovely panelists, all women working in science. And our topic today is, in fact, women in science. We'll get started by first having everyone introduce themselves, talking a little bit about where they are originally from, also which discipline in science fields they work, and also, of course, giving their name. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Saku Vertelek, and I work in astrophysics, and I was born in what is now Bangladesh.
My name is Magali Koch. I'm a geologist, and my specialty is hydrology or groundwater exploration in arid lands, also environmental change detection in desert areas and also in semi-arid environments. I work at Boston University, and we use satellite images as a mapping tool for locating new resources and for evaluating also environmental change.
Excellent.
My name is Irene Bosch. I'm originally from Venezuela. I actually work in Worcester, Massachusetts in the UMass Medical School. And I've been here for a couple of years studying cell biology and now working as a professor. And my specialty is to see how viruses change the cell and how cells respond to that virus infection. So.
My name is Suchi Gopal. I'm originally from India. I came to do my graduate work in the US, and my background is in geography and environment. I'm a professor at Boston University.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all introducing yourselves. And the first topic I think we'll start discussing is inspiration. How were you inspired to get involved in the field of science? Anyone want to start us off?
Well, maybe I can start.
Okay, go for it.
I can start with my background. I am actually German and Venezuelan. I was born in Germany and grew up in Venezuela. And my inspiration comes actually from the time, or the time I spent in Venezuela as a child. I had the opportunity to travel much around the country by car as well as by plane. My father is a pilot; that's his hobby. So at a very early stage, I was able to actually view the landscape from the air. And Venezuela is a very nice country with a lot of landscape variety, and rainforest, mountain ranges, coastal areas, etc. And the second thing that basically that led me to study geology and become a scientist is that I have two geologists in my family, Venezuelan family, and from an early age I knew what they do, that they like to be outdoors, and I love nature, and basically that inspired me. Venezuela is also an oil-producing country, so geology is quite a job or a profession that is important there. And well, that basically brought me to the idea to study geosciences.
Excellent. Great story. Anyone else want to contribute anything?
I can go.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
I've always liked math, starting from when I was very young. But in the beginning, I didn't realize I actually wanted to go into physics. So I was very fond of anthropology also, and biology. But when I was taking biology in high school, I did an experiment. I was at the University of Missouri at the time, the laboratory school, and they had a nuclear reactor there. And one of my students, his father worked at, one of my fellow students' father worked there, and they had an outreach program to allow high school students to use the reactor. So I took some seeds to grow, and we exposed them to different levels of it was carbon-60 at the time, to see how it affected the growth of the seeds. And when I wrote up the paper, I spent more time describing the cobalt-60 source than I did the beans or whatever. I really did not care much for beans. And my biology teacher told me at that time that he thought I would really enjoy physics, and he was correct. So, but that's what got
So
me
he
into
encouraged
physics.
you.
Oh yes,
Okay.
he was a good mentor and very encouraging to me. Yes.
It's funny because I don't remember anybody telling me study biology. I guess they wanted me to study medicine, which didn't happen. But my dad, who was, I think, the truly scientist at home, he was very proud that I didn't study medicine and yet went through a more sort of basic science-oriented career. But I think the crucial person there in my home was my grandmother, who had emigrated from Europe and lived with us in Venezuela, and she studied lepra, and she was a scientist, and she was personal friends of Marie Curie, so I always learned all these stories. And so instead of, you know, bed stories, I would have a science, or, you know, the science story of how Marie Curie didn't love her husband or did love her husband, or, I mean, all the things you don't read about, but she would tell me about. And so she always put the human side of the story, but and how these lepra, how tragic the whole the story of the lepra, and how much she had contributed to it. As a matter of fact, she was involved in the vaccination, the first vaccination process for lepra. So it was kind of a experience through home, I guess, that we went
in
slowly.
that respect, I think our histories are similar, no?
Yeah, and you know how you spend hours and hours with your grandparents, sometimes more than with your parents when your parents work. So that's exactly what happened in my case. So she was a role model, and she was the figure, and she didn't have, at that point she had lost her husband, so she was the example of a woman alone raising her daughter and being a scientist in the beginning of the century. She had to dress up as a man to go to school in Europe. So that's how.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Yeah.
My background is somewhat similar in the sense both my parents are physicians, and my mother was one of the first women in India to enter a medical school. Her background was in math, but she figured she couldn't do much with math other than being a teacher, you know, at that point in the 40s or 50s in India. So she became a doctor. And so her love was surgery, but you know, as women, they really couldn't enter into these men-dominated or male-dominated fields. So she became a gynecologist or obstetrician.
Yes.
And so I think she was the greatest source of my inspiration, you know, because you see a role model in your own mother to pursue whatever you wanted. And she never ever sort of said, this is the path I choose for you and you have to do this. But they all became, you know, in many ways, you know, fulfillment of her dreams. You know, each one became something that she wanted to be, probably, you know. So I think in an unconscious way, you try to sort of follow your grandmothers or parents or whoever is your role model.
And somehow also as a child, when you hear that one of your family members, could be in my case, it's my aunt on my Venezuelan, you know, side. She belonged to actually one of the first female geologists to graduate at the main university in Venezuela, and that was in the mid-60s, I think. And I was probably, you know, I mean, I was still a kid, you know, small kid, but somehow that idea that, you know, she was among the first one to become geologist in Venezuela somehow sticks to your mind, and you grow up with that. So that's similar to
Great.
I actually did not have anyone in the hard sciences in my family, so I was the rebel in my family, and my parents could not understand why I wouldn't go into something like literature. They're both in linguistics, and my sister started off in literature, so, and I was the first one.
But you had your teacher. That
I had my teacher, right, and I had
so
teachers in math.
All
my math teachers through 9th grade were women, and I found them all very inspiring. They were really good math teachers. Of course, since 9th grade, I haven't had a single who was a woman. It was, you know, that was it. But it worked. It worked before. Yes, it's really true that all my upper class and in college and even at graduate school, I had only men as teachers. Yeah.
What I find fascinating is, you know, when you go to teach in a large class, this is off the subject. You know, most of the students expect to see, if you are doing something like physics or math or computers You know, I teach a spatial database class. They expect a man to be there,
Right,
and you know,
yes.
the first 10 days you're trying to convince them, you know, it's you, you know, and you're trying to project yourself in so
Right.
many ways to make them believe that you're quite capable of teaching,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
the subject which they think should be taught by a man.
This feeds very well into our next question, in that I'd like you to describe maybe your career experiences as women scientists, and also talk about, in general terms, maybe some of the obstacles or barriers, and maybe even rewards and achievements that have happened to you that you've encountered along the way. Yeah, I think that really relates well to what we were already talking about.
Well, I can sort of start a little bit in terms of barriers or obstacles. As I told you, I did my bachelor's and master's in India, and there women were expected to be married by, you know, the age 18, 19, 20, you know, at that point in time. Now things are changing, of course. And so if you wanted to pursue a career, and let alone carry on a master's or a PhD program, they didn't pay any attention to you. They would actually try to hold you back. They won't give you the grades that you deserve. They would hold you back. They won't give you the ranking that you deserve, because they thought, well, you know, you're going to be behind, you know, cooking in the kitchen anyway. Why do you need such a big degree? You know, so
don't
that's
think
what
it's a
I
waste-
broke against.
waste
It's a
of-
waste
yeah.
of resources.
Of resources, yeah.
And that's when I decided to pursue my PhD and, you know, come to the States, because I figured, hey, you know, it can't be that bad on the other side, you know. Little did I know what I was coming in for, you know. I mean, it's the same gender issue again,
Right.
but, you know, in a different way,
That's
you know.
right,
So I'll stop and let.
A little bit more subtle
Yeah,
here
yeah,
than back
yeah,
there.
right.
They come right out. It's certainly true that in Bangladesh, it was easy for a woman to become a college professor or a doctor, and that was because colleges were for either men only or women only. So women taught women, and women would only go to women doctors. So those two professions have been open basically since ground zero. But in almost anything else, it's very difficult if you're a woman, and it's changed a little bit now, but it's still more true in Bangladesh than in India. I mean, I know a lot of women astronomers from India, but
That's true.
not too many from
So you're saying
Bangladesh.
that they were separated between male and female classes?
Yes, until university,
Oh.
and it still is true that, I mean, there are some schools that are coeducational, but mostly schools are all separate between girls and boys, men and women.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a very different environment than here.
And so they
Well,
don't put too many resources into the girls' college.
I see.
You know, they can hold that back.
I remember I did my master degree in Germany, and we were, in geology, we were probably 25% female students and 75% male, and it was considered more, you know, a male dominant, you know, profession. And but nowadays that I
Right,
am
pretty much.
actually, you know, teaching these courses, and in many countries, including the Arab world, I see that that has changed enormously. Well, I can tell you one story. For example, in Kuwait, I had the opportunity to give a workshop, and of course, when they read my name, well, they don't know if I'm a female or a male. Magali, I mean, that also happens here in the United States. So when they first see you, they're first kind of shocked.
It's a shock,
Right,
Megan.
yes,
And
yes.
surprised. But I was equally surprised in Kuwait, because I was expecting to see actually more male students than female students. That was Kuwait University, you know, the geology department. And to my surprise, there were actually more women. And so I gave my, you know, workshop, but later on I asked my colleague, who's a male, you know, scientist, and he explained to me, yeah, what happens is that all the male students, they actually get funded by the government to actually get their degree in Europe or in the United States. And that's why you see so many female geologists in Kuwait.
Yes.
So I thought that's interesting. no?
Right, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in Europe, it's also happening at a different level. You will see that because I had the opportunity to also to work in Spain, and I have many colleagues in Spain, etc. And I see that it's easier for women scientists, at least in my my profession, to get a job at the university easier in southern European countries than, for example, in Germany.
Oh yes, Germany
Yeah,
is
it is.
notorious
Yeah.
about
And
not
why
having women
Portugal
in the
and
sciences, yes.
Spain? Why? Because science wasn't that important in the first place. And now that they, you know, became are part of the EU, well, there's money flowing into that. And what happens is that all the good scientists are anyway in United States or somewhere else, or even in Germany or England
Right,
or whatever.
They go abroad to study.
Yes. So that money flows in, and who's left?
Right.
Women scientists.
And the typical statistics that they show in American universities for sciences is that yes, you have an equal proportion or sometimes a larger proportion of female in the undergraduate classes, then you have sort of an equal proportion in graduate classes, and then right after graduate school when either you are trying to make your family, you know, start your family, that's a huge drop, and then percentage-wise, you have a huge difference between male in academia than women, and then at director positions it's less than 1% women, and at, you know, dean positions then you have
Yes,
0.1%. So you go and change the spectrum of women, and those people who are directing a department will have power then to shape the life of that department. So it's like a dean of a school or a president of a university. When it's a female, I'm sure things will start changing. You know,
We hope so.
They're
We
changing
can
in MIT.
keep
too. We
a-
have a female
keep a
president now.
magnifying glass on MIT and see what happens. But since they
Once
have a
again,
woman
you guys have
president. Yes.
segued really nicely into our next question, and that is in terms of gaining a promotion or obtaining grants or even, you know, getting a higher salary. What kind of obstacles as women have you come across?
well, I can say just briefly that it's very hard to get federal funding, but we all have to do it in academia because that's how we we find support. In my cases, 100% of my grants come from federal funding, which is National Institutes of Health. And so it's very competitive. And I think there you have to compete right out with anybody, female, male, equally. I also noticed that if you had the chance to have a good mentoring in terms of how you compete, and it's a know-how it's totally, nobody will teach you that when you go to school, really, in general. So depending on your mentor and who you have around you, it will make a huge difference. And it's very hard. And if you have to share your life in the lab and teaching with your family, it makes it even harder. So that's when a lot of my male partners at work would be very late at night working, and the wives will be with the children, and I would have to, let's say, sometimes run or, you know, make sure that somebody's with my children, or if you have a supportive husband, make sure that he could please stay that one more day. But it's basically taken for granted. So that's when time becomes an issue, because you have to put many hours writing and perfecting your application. It's almost like a contract. It has to be perfect language, perfect sense. Everything has to be done, and it requires a lot of time. So.
That's true. It's a pretty hard road, especially if you mix your research, your career with having a family. I had my son after I got my tenure, which is so lucky because I couldn't have done it otherwise. Because it takes a lot of time to to have a family and to be a good mom. You do want to be a good mom. You do want to be a good researcher at the same time. It's a tough road.
Yes.
But to answer the question that you had before about federal funding, I haven't seen any discrimination at the federal level in terms of funding based on the fact whether we are men or women. Like you said, we are all treated equally, and if you get a grant, it's good for you because you fought against a whole world of men and women who are equally, bright, and you got your grant.
Actually,
so it's a
we're
big deal.
considered minority. Women are considered minority at the
There are
NIH
special
level.
awards or award programs to encourage women scientists actually to submit a proposal and to get an award.
I have to also say that sitting in those review sessions at NIH is very educating,
Humbling.
and it turns out that so-called favoring women doesn't happen really. I mean, they're all just going to count how good your science is,
Yes,
and
yeah.
That's
gender
the first
becomes
criteria.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I mean, in the very one time I participated, I couldn't see gender as a gaining points. I mean, they might say they favor women, but really it's equal competition and.
But
you're
I
out
think
there.
this is the situation right now, because probably here, especially here in the United States, women started early in the 70s actually to fight for their rights, and that is now happening in Europe. They are basically lagging behind the United States at least 10 years, because now the EU has a
There's all
policy
sorts of
actually,
programs. They've also
special
introducing
programs,
special
yes,
programs
to
for
encourage
women.
women,
Yeah.
in sciences and all that.
Yeah. They did that about 10 years ago in the US. I mean,
Right.
most of my funding comes either from NASA or for the National Science Foundation. And for the regular proposal rounds, there's no discrimination
Yeah.
or favoring or whatever between men and women, because I've
Yeah.
also sat on many of the review panels. But the NSF did try a few years ago to have special programs, especially for women in the sciences.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you. NSF. What is
National
that?
Science Foundation.
Thanks,
Sorry,
guys.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The National Science Foundation.
Yeah, we should
And one
be
of the
careful.
programs they did is they had what's called a visiting professorship for women, and which was actually a thing I did apply for and get, because they were trying. Yeah, thank you. They were trying to get women into faculties to teach, because in the sciences the percentage of women in the
Right.
faculty is abysmally low.
Exactly.
I mean,
Minuscule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially
it's
at
minuscule.
especially at full professorship.
At full
level.
professorship,
I mean,
it's
it's like
practically
yeah.
non-existent.
in Germany right now, I think it's 7%.
Well, I can give you the statistics
7
for the
and 10.
Department of Astronomy at Harvard. The first woman to get a PhD, or the first person to get a PhD from the Department of Astronomy, was a woman, Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin. She got it, I think, in 1925, and she got to be a full professor in 1959. She was the first tenured woman in the Harvard Department of Astronomy. And following her, there was one other woman who got full tenure at Harvard, and she's there now. That's it in the history.
Amazing.
And this
Since
is in the science
1925.
department in
It-
general?
this is, no, this is in
Just
the Department
astronomy.
of Astronomy.
Astronomy.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Harvard is particularly notorious
I
for
was
not
going to
having too
say-
many women. But it's true of a lot
yeah,
of
true.
fields.
So just to keep in perspective that once you're starting to apply for grants, you have to have a professorship. So the point is that once you have a woman in that professorship level, it's already a screen, a very
Process, yeah.
a very
Exactly.
difficult place to reach. For most women scientists, very few can reach that position. So once you're there, okay, you can now you can compete. I mean, you've already proven to survive all sorts of negative situations, I think. So, as a matter of fact, that brought me to think what to do about that. And I know it's not part of your question.
No, this is
but
great.
I wanted to share that.
Yes,
And that happens very recently. I was running one of my NIH grants, and I'm the director of that grant. And this is a beautiful grant because for the first time you have a part of the grant that says do whatever you want, which is never heard of.
That's right.
And they call it educational grants.
Right.
So it's
What
been
type of
wonderful.
grant is that?
This is the
I love it.
wonderful grant.
Megali wants to get it.
yeah. Tell us more.
Everybody
Yes,
should get
okay,
it.
Right.
It's an educational component of a huge biodefense grant that is applied to study the viruses effect and immunology of human beings. So it has a small 1% of that huge amount goes to education, and that's the part that I direct. But as a matter of fact, I've been doing it for 3 years. I have 1 more year. And I decided to look carefully at all my colleagues that I admire, really, that are not working in science because they are with their children and they're desperate to come back. They're so smart and they're so capable. And I did. So one by one, I call them every year to do different things. And by now, we have 4 PhD level, highly
Motivated,
educated
probably.
and smart women working with me. So I thought, maybe this is a good thing to just write a grant to see how you could recuperate these women who are highly skilled, waiting, and universities do not hire part-time. And that's a rule that we're all very aware of. and for teaching positions. So they're so happy to come back, and I invented this sort of a contract figure to bring them back to science. One by one have told me that it has been the most beautiful experience, because they've been 13 years with their kids at home, and they're desperate to, you know,
Come back
Well,
to
that's
the
a
work.
lovely
This-
idea.
Yeah, this is a good example of networking.
Yes,
And
yes.
I
Right.
think this is something so important for
Yes.
us, because we are in that respect a minority.
Mhm.
I mean, in the field of sciences, is a network basically that allows you to exchange information and to have access to information.
Right.
So you made an effort of actually contacting these people,
yeah,
no? But otherwise,
yeah.
I mean, how could they find out about
No,
this?
they
Yeah.
Part of it is you as a person make a decision, you know, that you stand
Yes.
on the moral grounds and you help other women.
Right.
You know, like you gave the example before, and which is what I constantly strive to do at this point. Now that I've become a full professor, I don't have any more hurdles to sort of jump up to. I can be giving, and I can help anybody else who needs that help to move them along up the career path. And this I've sort of taken seriously, and that's a personal decision. I don't want to be the PI. Somebody else wants to be a PI who's a junior, more than welcome. I just join the team and I would do my part because they need it.
That's good. If
We
we
need
can
more
do that,
people
then
like
we
that.
need more like that. Yes.
I've just decided
We
this is
should
my
clone
choice.
you.
Exactly.
That's very admirable, because unfortunately that's not what you see. And I say unfortunately because in science, you should generate ideas. You should not run out of ideas. So why to expect somebody to take your idea? I mean,
Right.
I thought this didn't happen, but it does
But it does
happen.
It happens,
unfortunately.
And it
quite a
happens
bit,
to your own
unfortunately.
detriment of your own career. And I don't know if it happens more than in women than for men. I think it just happens. I mean, authority allows them to maybe, you know, conduct the department. And then actually they say, we have the right, this is our department, we're going to run it the way we think is best, and trust me, it's the best. And, you know, maybe they're right, but in the meantime,
I've been
You
part
know.
of those deals too. Where the department chair said, I'm going to write this grant, I'd go, okay, you know. If you think this is like a department policy, I've participated in many grants where the men became the PI because of their connections in the old boys network. So we thought, oh, we'll get funded. And so it's for the greater good. You go, you know, okay, I'm willing to sort of write my part and let somebody else be the PI because he's got all these connections.
Right.
And in the last few years, I've noticed that, you know, it doesn't always happen.
Right.
Because men also hate each other, you know,
Yes, yeah.
for
Oh, yeah.
various reasons.
Right. Yes.
So, you know, I could write a small grant and, you know, get a smaller pot of money. I don't need those big grants, you know,
Yeah.
that you need to be
Yeah.
a part of a big team.
yeah. And I think it's part of intimidation type of relationship, and it's just very powerful.
It's
And-
not just intimidation, it's also an unconscious thing of, you know, power. You know, we have so many more people that we know, you know, and they give you a list of all these names of all the guys that they know, and you are sort of thinking, what women are there in the positions,
Yes.
you know, that can help us out.
But if
Right.
you always give in, you know, you're not going to make anything change.
The one grant that we just finished, it was a 5-year grant. It's the very first grant I did when I moved to UMass, and the co-PI is my mother. So it's kind of
That's
so
pretty
that was
good.
very
That's nice.
interesting. And the first day when I went to get my introductory lecture, somebody was introducing us as new professors, and she was sitting next to me, and she happened to be the head of the Department of Pediatrics at UMass, and she asked me, you know, why you're here, and I said, well, I started this grant with my mom, and she thought it was the hilarious thing, and it turns out that her specialty is relationships between moms and daughters. So
really?
she was kind of hoping that we could finish the grant before we destroy each other's lives.
Right, yes.
But
But
I
it's funny because when I was applying to colleges, one of the colleges I applied to was Stanford. And the main reason I didn't go to Stanford is that my mother was a graduate student there at the time. And I thought, okay, maybe not. So it was very funny. So I went to MIT and I've regretted it ever since. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
Well,
You
you know,
didn't
this
like
is
MIT?
1970. At MIT, my entering class was 10% women. And that was the first time that it hit double digits in women. So it was like a huge, I mean, it was a huge jump from the class before, which had like 60 or something. In the physics majors, when I ended up being a physics majors, we were 160 physics majors, of which 6 were women. So it was
Wow.
not a very, I mean, there were no women, basically, and the professors at that time, and this is 36 years ago, felt perfectly, calm and, assured about saying that they didn't think women should go into physics, and you in particular as a woman. I mean, I remember once, of course, we all lived in the women's dorm at that time, and the women's dorm was closest to the main campus, and once we had a physics recitation following a major snowstorm, so only 2 of us women showed up, and the professor who was doing it, it was basically a recitation, he said, well, it's hardly worth giving a lecture with 2 people, let's just ask questions and, talk. So, he asked us questions, we answered and whatever. And then about halfway through the class, a boy walked in to the course, and he said, now we can start asking interesting questions. I mean,
That's
he felt
Yeah,
no
perfect.
compunction saying that.
Yeah.
He meant it. And he didn't think he was, I mean,
Inappropriate.
he must have known he was insulting us, but but what I actually love about that episode is the next question he asked, one of us girls answered, and the boy had no clue. but that was the
Great
environment
story.
in the 70s at MIT. It was not a positive experience for women. Now, of course, they have something like 44% entering women, and I think it's 25% in physics majors. So that's a tremendous change from when I was there. But
That's
when I was
amazing.
there, it was a difficult place.
Wow.
I mean, it's still nowadays you can say that most people are biased. That
Right,
there are
right,
these
yes.
hidden biases that you don't
Mhm.
think you have, and you do
Right.
have them, even women.
Yeah, no, and
it's
it's
just the way we, we were brought up and
That's right.
social.
That's right.
It's a
yes,
striking
that's
one
right.
thing,
You
right?
yourself are biased, and it's very
Yes.
hard to notice your own
That's
bias
those are the
about
hidden
many things.
biases.
Right? Yeah. But yes, I've certainly noticed that. I mean, people looking at me do not. I mean, they have a certain image of what astrophysicist is, and it's usually not someone who's my size. I mean, it's not
Someone
necessarily
who
that I'm a
Someone who's reaching to the stars.
You're too short.
I used to
You're
say
too short to be an astrophysicist.
well, exactly. I mean,
There is a height criteria that
Exactly.
you miss.
you find that people, you're at a meeting, and there are certain people who never see you. And my idea is that, of course, these are astronomers. They're used to looking up. They're not used to looking down. So it's not surprising that they don't see me. I mean, I am a little bit lower than they are. But, but you find it all the time. And it's just, it's a lot of factors. So, I mean, when I was a graduate student and I had to teach labs to the undergraduates, I used to love going in early the first day and just sort of sit around until all the students came in. And then I'd stand up, and I was the person teaching, and they never believed it. They always laughed. They thought I was a student saying. They'd say, "So where's the teacher? Where's the professor? Or whatever?" And I'd get up and say, "I am," and they'd always laugh because they thought I was teasing.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Some people are so honest. It's great. Because, like, and in the door in my lab says Irene Bosch. I mean, Bosch is like a German name, and Irene is like.
Right.
So they're hoping to see this tall, blonde,
Yes, right, yes.
German, and there I am with my lab coat, and so I'm looking for Irene Bosch. I said, "That's me." I said, "No, that's not you."
Right, yes,
You
right.
can't be bad at her.
Yeah.
But it's, and then they say, "I will never guess you're Irene Bosch." So they actually tell you, it's like, that's not possible.
So quickly, maybe we can talk about what advice you could give to young women that are interested in starting in science. I know we've talked a lot about your experiences already, and I know that you're very interested in passing along these ideas and really encouraging women. So maybe we can talk something about the advice we can give to those younger students.
I would say you have to persist and believe in yourself and believe in your dreams, and you can do it.
Yes,
Don't pay attention to what other people say. Just do what you feel is really,
Right. I mean, you have to really love what you want, what you're
And
doing.
you have to be convinced.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. You have to love what you're doing, so that you can, do it as much as is necessary to get where you want to get to. Because if you don't love it, you will not put in the effort that's needed, and a tremendous amount of effort is needed. I imagine considerably more for women than for men.
And for me.
Yeah. So you have to love it twice as hard and
What's-
work.
And be persistent.
And
and-
yeah,
and what you-
persistent. That's
What
that's
to
the-
do.
yeah.
It's very nice to hear that you're so optimistic. I need that. I need to hear that over and over.
Of course, yes.
Well, that's our advice.
Yeah, and
To young
then the one
people.
thing I would add is that I'm not sure that's all I want to see done. I mean, is there anything that we could actually do to, in the context of your institution, make sure that that message reaches the recipient? And how do we convey to this young entering students that it's okay? Because the truth is that I've seen a lot of dropouts. I've never seen that before, but I've seen it in UMass. And what I mean with dropouts is that they have a very competitive graduate school, and these girls will think they don't fit, and they'll leave after the first and second year. And I've been witnessing that and decided to participate actively to try to change that. And I don't want to say that it's been victorious, but I have been able to revert some of these few cases that I could intervene. So then that makes me wonder, well, it can't be me who's doing this. It has to be somebody else. And I know they have very talented people who could come and address these communities of younger scientists, or some of them are extremely bright, persistent, vivid, and they have everything to win in life and in success. But some don't, and some just need that little,
They need the extra confidence in themselves, a little bit of push.
So I've had students who come to me and said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving, and I have my bags, and I'm leaving, I'm going home. I said, you're not. You're not going home. You're staying. They said, no, I'm leaving. No, you're not. So I mean, things like that. I said, where is the support? So do we need to, look for other ways to make sure that we communicate the right things, and where is that? I mean,
Well, one thing we've done at the Center for Astrophysics, I mean, the older women in science, we often try to arrange things for the younger women where we have someone come, like if we have data aides and undergraduates, then we have special
introduction or
well, no,
class?
it's just like we'll have a session. For example, Monday we had a session on how to get into graduate school, and we'd done something similar for all the undergraduates, but then we did a special one just for the women. And they all came. And then you could tell, we all sat around, the older women told their experiences, and actually what we called it is what I wish I knew before I went to graduate school.
That's
And if you do things like that often, I mean, especially when you have young people coming in as first-year students,
That's
they
wonderful.
really need to hear from the upper class students what kept them on and how they managed, so
and
that
who
they have
organized that?
ways.
I mean, how did you come up to organize that? It's just the faculty got together and
Was that,
organized?
Well, these are actually
initiative?
the women scientists at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. The older ones got together, but we also have a couple of postdoctoral fellows who are NSF, National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellows, and I think part of their fellowship is to do some outreach program to graduate students,
I was
let
going
them
to
know
say.
about the NSF program and in general. So they did a little thing, as I said, for all the undergraduates, and then the women's program invited them to come and talk to just the women and have other women be there who
That's
could
great.
give their experiences. So
Great.
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, hopefully this conversation we've just had will reach some ears and some eyes, and we'll have done some changing for that, the better good.
Well,
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for being here, ladies.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time.
thank you for
Thanks.
having
Thank
us.
you.
It's
Thank
lovely.
you.
That's nice.